Hey gang, welcome back to another new template design walkthrough. This template is called Spotlight. So this is a fun little design here just to set up to create this spotlight and shadow type of effect. And let's just jump over here to our layers and take a look at the layer options that are in this design and look at how to customize it. So starting at the top, as always, are our color grading layers. So these are some independent layers inside of here that can be turned on or off. You could change opacities, you could create some custom looks, but they're really just designed to add a little bit of final punch and contrast and color work on the image, right? Just to polish them up a little bit, but feel free to change opacities on that. Below that are our facial highlight boost layer. So just designed to bring up the highlights on the face and the skin of your subject, just to keep that attention on, and we'll take a look at applying that as soon as we get our subject turned on. Below that we have some optional text layers that can be turned on or off. These are preset to an overlay blend mode. I thought it looked kind of cool on some of these background patterns to kind of interact with them based on overlay. You could always come up and set these to normal and just definitely pick a solid color fill, you know, of any kind or color to put in there. All right, so that's very easy to do as well. Let's go ahead and disable those text layers. Directly below that, you're going to see some preset kind of spotlight options. So we have this star option that's on by default. If we turn that off, here's kind of like the traditional circle spotlight. We have a triangle spot there, a diamond. And here we have actually some horizontal slatted type of lines. And above that is kind of a pretty cool diamond grid. I think that looks pretty sweet. And we'll look at how to customize those in just a minute. But let's turn our star option on. Below that we have this subject brighten layer that's clipped to our subject group. You'll notice the subject group always marked in red. That's where we want to place our subject. And this is just meant to brighten up the face. Again, the idea that there's a spotlight, so their face and upper body is going to be brightened up a little bit. So that's there. Below that, this is our little corner shadow for the floor. So it's just to give the idea or indication that there is a floor space here. If you're wanting to do like a 3/4 no feet type of look, you know, you could just turn that corner shadow off if you want, and it'll just look like a background, like a wall or something without the floor there. Then we have a background spotlight gradient. I do want to talk about this one for just a second, because you'll take notice with each of the shape groups, the shape is really defined by a mask on the group. Now these shapes can be moved and you could change the sizes and things. For instance, let's turn this circle one, because this is going to be the easiest to see this. If I unlink this circle mask here, I could press Command or Control T, and let's say I wanted to make that spotlight a little bigger and I wanted it to be a little higher. All right, so something like that. We could easily move and change that. Let's apply it. But you'll see this kind of highlight spotlight is now in the lower part of that circle instead of the center. Well, that's being controlled by this background spotlight effect. In fact, you can see this layer is doing almost all of the heavy lifting for creating this effect. All right, so if we want to modify this, all we need to do is just select this layer, and then we're going to come over, I'm going to click and hold and select the gradient tool. And it's going to automatically pop up our gradient controls. So all I would need to do from this point is just raise this up and recenter this with our new size of our circle. And then if you wanted to change the gradation here, you could use any of these controls within here to make that spotlight bigger or smaller as you would like. All right, so you could increase that a little bit. You can increase the fade just a little bit, and of course the size is that outer ring. So if you move or change any of these, you know, that's great, but just know that you can also move that that spotlight effect around and recenter things up based on what you need. All right, so I did want to demonstrate that. I'm just going to Command or Control Z and put things back how they were. And there we go. All right, let's turn our star back on. All right, below that, here is a noise layer, because here's the thing with backgrounds that have a transition basically from lighter to darker. It's very common to get banding in the image. I'm going to turn this noise layer off. Let's try our circle layer. Banding, you can kind of see it happening through here. is where you see basically these bands of color, encircling that gradient, or following that gradient. Well, the one way that you can correct for that is by adding some noise. So you'll take notice when I turn this noise layer on, see how much of that banding disappears. So this is just like a little checkpoint layer that I have in here to kind of, counter correct for some of that banding that's automatically going to happen whenever you have a gradient background with not a lot going on. All right, so that banding is just something that is unavoidable, but this is a way that we help control it. So that's what that layer is all about right there. All right, and then on the bottom, this is our background color cast. So this is what's going to create the idea of the color that's being casted from the spotlight, and we're going to show how to use that in just a second. But that's all the layers that are in here. You're going to take notice in each of the groups there's a couple different layers as well. So this is the shadow color, so basically the color that's creating any shadow area of the image, and then our brightness adjustment, which is creating the lighting condition to mimic that spotlight effect. All right, so each of these groups have those same two layers in there. So let's turn a subject on and let's look at how to customize the colors on this, because there's a few little spots we want to point out. All right, so what I'm going to do is drop down to our subject. I'm going to go ahead and turn our subject layer on. All right, so here's our subject. We've already got them in. You're just using full length for now, okay? So let's just start with this star background. If we want to tweak the colors to match our subject colors, there's a few places that we want to do this. The first one that we want to do it is our background color cast. All right, so I'm going to double click on this. And this color you kind of want to be a lighter, less saturated tone. All right, so if we sample one of the colors here, you can see how bright and vivid that is. It's actually going to look better and more realistic if we kind of bring that down and more desaturated. All right, so just a little bit of a color cast. Maybe I'll warm that up to a little bit more of the orange tone versus yellow. All right, something like that. That looks pretty good. So it's this idea that you have this bright spotlight, but it's creating this color cast as it goes out to shadow. So that's what the first place we want to set that. The next one is in the shape group itself. You can see right here is the shadow color. So let's double click here, and I'm just going to click uniform color again, and it's automatically going to start to create that shadow color. Now, one of the things you can do is you can make that shadow darker or lighter once you set it by just pulling this slider up and down. So if you wanted it to feel very dark and shadowy and punchy, which is a very cool look, you just pull that down and make things much darker. All right, very easy to do. Or if you want to see more of your subject, you could just bring that back up, which looks super cool as well. All right, so there's the second place we want to set the color. And the third one, you're going to see we have an automatic shadow being applied to our subject, again, to create that look that there's a spotlight casting this little hard shadow on them on the wall. And to set that, what we want to do is come down to our subject group, and you're going to see there's a drop shadow getting applied here. So you could turn that off and on if you wanted. I think it looks much cooler with it on. But what we want to do is double click on our drop shadow, and you're going to see there's a color being set right here. All right, so I'm going to click on that. It's going to bring up our color picker. Now, here's one thing that we want to talk about. You'll take notice now with that red color being set. See how the shadow is being dropped below the feet? That doesn't look very good at all. Okay, we want the idea of that shadow is really starting where the spotlight is starting. Now, to do that, what we're going to do is start by picking a color that we want to make the shadow out of. Maybe a little bit of a darker tone, okay? Now, you're going to see this shadow is set with a darken blend mode. So anywhere where this shadow is happening from the subject, if this is darker than the background color, it's going to show up because it's set to darken whatever it's over top of. So the key to this is we really want to just brighten this shadow up until it disappears from like this feet and lower leg area. All right, so if I move this up, see how it starts to fade away down here a little bit brighter, and it's still going to give that idea that there's a colored shadow being cast from this colored spotlight. But you'll take notice now, see how you're not seeing that shadow because since this is set to darken, this color is lighter than this shadowy area. Therefore, you don't see it until it starts to transition up into these lighter tones. And it actually creates this nice realistic effect that shadow is being caused as that spotlight kind of spills and works up to your subject. But you still get that very cool colored shadow in behind your subject there. All right, so that's one thing to pay attention to. If you're seeing that shadow around the feet where you don't want it, just brighten that shadow up enough. And you can even desaturate a little bit if you want by moving over to the left here. But just brightening it up enough that it doesn't do any darkening, and it gets this nice transition here. Now the other thing, if you're using a subject that's specifically lit from one side or the other, you can also at this point just with the drop shadow highlighted here, just click and drag this shadow wherever you want it. So if your lighting's coming very hard from the subject's left side, camera right side, you could pull that shadow over this way. You could even extend it out more if you wanted. Or from this side, since we got like a nice strong highlight on this side, I think it makes more sense to bring that shadow over this way. All right, so very easy to pull that shadow around and place it where you want it as well. So let's click OK. So there you can go. Very simple to set those colors up. There's just those 3 little places to watch for when setting that color to keep it nice and kind of realistic looking. All right, so then we can come up to our facial highlight boost layer. We'll pick the one with the lighter skin, make sure the mask is selected, and then I'm just going to grab a white brush and paint over her face. And you're going to see that's just going to brighten those highlights up so our attention's going back onto the face where we want it. So now that our subject's on, let's take a look at these other options just to see what they look like with a subject in here. So that's our star. So here's our circle. Again, we can set this color the same way by double clicking here. Let's pick a nice dark uniform jersey color, whatever you're sampling from. Again, you could make it super dark and make it feel like an actual just super bright spotlight, which is really fun. Or you could bring it up so that you're getting a little bit of transparency in that, which is also super, super cool. So there's our circle. There's our triangle. Again, let's quickly set that color just so we can see how it looks. There we go. Super cool. Darker, brighter. I love this template so much. I'm having so much fun playing with this one. So there's our diamond shape. Same way, let's sample over here. There we go. So there's the diamond. Now these are kind of fun here, the horizontal lines. So again, let's pick a jersey color. I think these look cool to make them nice and dark and punchy. So it just really looks like light coming through, like some sort of slats or blinds or something like that. I just think it makes such a cool look. And here's our diamond grid up here, which again, I think is another very cool look. So let's add a little bit of color in with this and then maybe desaturate. Again, you could go nice and dark and moody just to create this super interesting look, which I think is really cool. All right, so there's how you can easily make these changes and turn these on and create this kind of realistic spotlight effect pretty simply. And again, I can't wait to see what you guys make with this. I love this one. I think it's so fun. Please tag me, post in the JHP Backgrounds group your samples as you make them, and I can't wait to hear how your customers and people respond and how you're using this one. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you on the next one very soon.